Hey guys, it's me, EODGamer here, and in this video we have an exciting one for you. We have Sparkle, a new character in 2.0, as well as Ruan Mei, who came out in 1.6 before Panic. Who is the better investment? It's a very tricky question because both of them are excellent harmony units. Both of them 5 stars, one quantum, one ice. But in this video we'll be talking a lot of things, current value of these two characters, as well as looking to the future and what I think. As with all of my investment videos, I promise to be as honest as well as transparent as I can. For the majority of this video, I also will not be inputting my own personal bias. If you care about my personal thoughts, you can find it all the way at the end of the video. But let's now start off first with current value. We don't like to waste any time on this channel. So, both of them, very strong units, but I think this is the best place to summarize right now. You want to know if you're buying something, a unit right now, you want to know what exact value it gives you, and the clearest way I can explain it is if you have a unit like Imbibitor Lunae, you will find a lot more value with, for example, a character like Sparkle, and if you are a person who has Jingliu as your main character, your go-to probably would have been Ruan Mei already. Now, if you have both, unfortunately, I can't help you there. You probably need to find a second job or something. Jokes aside, what else do they do? I think currently in the game, we have not as many characters that need a lot of skill points that are in the super meta versus Ruan Mei, who really benefits every single team more or less she can play in right now. So if I were to give it to either one of them, in terms of now, like the right now as of time of recording, I would say that Ruan Mei is probably coming out a little bit on top just because that really she can fulfill any single team, DOT team, crit teams, hyper carry teams, dual DPS teams, you name it. She even opens like break effect as an option. So she does it all and it's definitely a lot more value right now. Whereas for Sparkle, on the other hand, which her value actually comes in later on in the video, you will see as it develops. Sparkle here benefits a few characters. For example, units like Imbibitor Lunae, for example, units like Qingque, and which are very skill point hungry characters, and a lot of others as well that are slightly skill point hungry but not like super. You can always get by with other characters. These two that come to mind as like the most skill point drinky characters in the game currently, and as you can see, both of them are not like top tier meta as of time of recording. Currently is like dominated by Jingliu, as well as characters, for example, like Black Swan, who was just released. These two play very nicely into Ruan Mei team compositions because she buffs crit damage, Sparkle, whereas Ruan Mei like benefits universal. So that is the difference between both of them, and that's my analysis. I think right now, if you were to compare both of them, in my honest opinion, probably Sparkle will be slightly less value generally across the board, unless of course if Imbibitor Lunae main or Qingque main than most of the other accounts. But of course, you guys know, talking about current value is not very helpful on its own. What we want to do is actually look in terms of current alternatives in the game. Of course, we all know Sparkle, there's not much alternatives. If you're looking for a character to, let's say the many things that she does. If you're looking for a character above skill points, you probably only really have Hanya in that slot as one of the alternatives. Ruan Mei kind of as an alternative, but none of them like truly gives as much skill points as a character like Sparkle. She straight up increases the max amount of skill points you can get. That has no alternative, but maybe you could say skill point net positive harmony characters like these two plus Ruan Mei, 3 of them might be like some alternatives in that sense, but not really true alternatives. So I'll just put them in super small here. So for any of you who are just like seeing this in the background and turning later on, I try to accommodate for you guys as well so you remember. But other than that, if you're talking about crit damage buffing and action advance, she does have a very strong alternative in a unit like Bronya. Of course, Bronya does 100% push, Sparkle is 50%, both of them buff crit damage as well. Bronya's win, and she's arguably like free, whereas Sparkle is a limited quantum unit, so depending on team compositions you play into could be slightly different. But Bronya gives you a lot if you're looking for the action advance, if you're looking for that crit damage buffing, and you don't really care too much about specifically quantum teams. Bronya does a lot of that, especially if your main DPS is not skill point drinky. For example, like Imbibitor Lunae, you might find Bronya as a decent alternative for a character, for example, like Sparkle. If you're talking about quantum characters, maybe you are a Zila main, maybe you are a Qingque main, there aren't any alternatives. She is the only quantum buffer in the game currently, unless, of course, and the key is, you want to know what is the Harmony Trailblazer. Do you think we're going to get a Trailblazer that's Harmony next? If so, you want to know what is the element for that unit. if Trailblazer in the next one is like an Ice Harmony versus like a Quantum Harmony, we could see a very, very unique difference. And for that reason, I'm just going to leave both of them here so we remember. If we get Imaginary, none of that matters, but who knows, it could either be Quantum or Ice, and that's an apparent risk in the near term, so I'll put that as like a possible alternative, but it's really like bridging the gap into something that we want to talk about in future too. I'll elaborate on this in a bit. Let me just leave them here first on the screen. So that is for Sparkle side. How about Ruan Mei? I would say, ironically, that the only thing that Ruan Mei doesn't fight with is the break effect buffing and the weakness breaking enhancing of a kit. No other character in the game has that. Maybe your only thing is Xue, but I wouldn't say like that's a true alternative, because everyone else, she benefits everyone. Like Ruan Mei buffs the whole team, and unfortunately she does compete with everyone in the game that is buffing. So any Harmony character she competes. For example, like any damage buffing, whatever, because she fits into so many teams. So naturally your choice is, do you want to add in any of the other Harmony characters, or do you want to add in Ruan Mei? Chances are Ruan Mei can fit into most of them, but also at something you can like find a very good alternative for her in most team compositions. But by far and large, I think the definition of Ruan Mei and why I think she's unique is she's generally played in dual DPS teams, and an Esther probably is like the closest alternative to that, especially if you're playing maybe with Black Swan together with Kafka kind of teams. Esther could be a good viable option. If you're running ice teams like Jingliu, maybe a character, for example, Pella could be an option as well, depending on what you're looking at. Ruan Mei does have quite a lot of alternatives in terms of what you want to play her, but the truth is she can be played in a lot of rosters, so that's why she has a lot of alternatives. So let's take that aside for now. The next thing I want to talk about is the stats of both of them, because that's something like, it's like current. You can see these like numbers here in this graph. If any of you are looking at this site, we actually did it in a previous video. If you are interested, you can check it out. We actually did a lot of these and like how explain more in detail, but basically is what you see here. So you see that Sparkle is slightly slower with slightly less attack than Ruan Mei, but her defensive stats are better and her burst cost is less. What I want to bring your attention to is the burst cost is less part of Sparkle, and it's very, very massive. For those of you who have Ruan Mei or you have like been watching Ruan Mei content, one of the toughest things about Ruan Mei, like this is talking about currently as well, is that Ruan Mei struggles with getting her burst uptime. To get that 3-turn perfect rotation like skill auto is very, very difficult. You need like specific gear for her. With 20 less burst cost means you're basically needing like one entire basic attack less, which means if you put on the exact same gear as Ruan Mei, hypothetically, Sparkle could have a 2-turn rotation, which is very, very massive if you were to ask me. 20 is like one full auto. You might need a bit more, but it's like 2+-ish. A lot less requirements for energy for Sparkle, that's for sure. And even if you do a 3-turn rotation on Sparkle, you don't have like super high requirements of having the same gear requirements as Ruan Mei. Most of you free-to-play players will find that Ruan Mei is a little bit harder to reach optimal, whereas Sparkle is going to be a lot more manageable to reach as well. Their stat distribution is more or less the same. Now that we've talked about currently what is the landscape between these two things, more importantly is you want to know if you purchase like these characters, for example if you already have Ruan Mei and you're thinking of purchasing Sparkle, how does your dollar actually stretch? Or maybe you just joined recently and you missed out on Ruan Mei and you're thinking whether you want to wait for Ruan Mei or pick out Sparkle here. You want to know about their future value, which is very, very important. Messing up the screen here real quick so that I'm making sure that I have your attention. It's definitely not an accident. But future value here, I want to actually talk about these two characters and what they will be in future. Between the two of them, now I want to say TLDR, the one that I think is likely going to be better in future significantly because Hoyoverse intervenes is going to be Sparkle. Sparkle is kind of like telling us that the game developers might be more inclined to adding more characters that scale, for example, with small skill points usage and stuff. She's the only character that has access to that. So I think that in terms of future value, if we see any more of that, she's gonna tremendously benefit. Whereas Ruan Mei, theoretically speaking, she's a very, very typical Harmony character, a very simple Harmony buffing unit that is able to slot into many, many different teams. She will have more and more competition coming into the game, that's without a doubt. With each Harmony character being added into the game, Ruan Mei technically competes with them indirectly in some sense also, because you could possibly replace Ruan Mei with that particular new unit in future. So in terms of future value, I think Sparkle will see a larger bump compared to Ruan Mei in terms of where she is in current value versus the near-term future. But of course, as we mentioned, the biggest threat to both of them will be the two Trailblazers here, as you can see, but it's really just one of them. What is the next one? We have physical and we have fire out already, so it's definitely not going to be of these two elements. So the chances are there's only like 5 elements left, and out of these 5 elements, the only ones that are left that doesn't affect either one of them will be imaginary, will be wind, and will be lightning. So the chances are technically 40% one of these is going to be affected. I think very highly, the chance is high that it might be imaginary or quantum. I'm just not too sure. It's just a total wild guess at the moment. But in my opinion, this is like the biggest factor, because if it's quantum, if Trailblazer turns out to be quantum, then you don't really need Sparkle for a mono quantum team anymore. You can easily just run quantum and just slot in, like, for example, the Planetary Rendezvous, Panacony Land of Dream sets, and you can get a lot of value that Sparkle offers, and maybe slap in a Bronya to get the proxy for the rest in a hyper carry quantum team as well. That is another thing to talk about. Of course, that is one, like, is a bit of a stretch, but I think that is something that is worth considering too, because it is a possibility that a new Trailblazer we know might be coming out from Harmony already, since Panacony is like the land of dreams and whatnot. So that is the second or the third category that I want to talk about in terms of future value and how they perform. The next one that I want to mention is about potential. Now, potential is a bit more trickier to explain. This one is not concrete, but it's just opinions that I think is worth considering. First things first, if Honkai Star Rail or Hoyover starts to release new characters, for example like Imbibitor Lune, for example like Qingque in the game, and free-to-play players do not have access to skill point buffing characters, for example like Sparkle, you will naturally have a very small audience to sell your characters to. So which begs the question, will there be a future 4-star character that increases skill point gauge? For example, maybe right now we only have, like, for example, Hanya, Tingyin, who are like slightly net positive, but what if we have a character in future, for example a 4-star that not only increases like the gauge, maybe instead of 2 but by 1 now, and maybe when you out or something you only give like 1 skill point, 2 skill points, so not as good as Sparkle but slightly less. If that is the case, then her value diminishes very quickly, and it's very easy to be done to power creep. In that case, if her skill point niche is no longer fulfilled, then she would arguably be fighting a lot more with Bronya than otherwise would. And if this is the case where her skill point positivity doesn't really matter too much, then Bronya is definitely a lot better in terms of action advancing compared to Sparkle, and that's my honest opinion. So that is, I see, like, the biggest risk for Sparkle in future. Is it a very huge risk? I don't think so, but it does make sense to me, because you can't keep selling characters that are skill point, very skill point hungry, and the majority of your population who didn't pull Sparkle don't have access to. That is a huge problem for their whole selling marketing scheme. Potential for Ruan Mei. The question of Ruan Mei's increase in value will then become, will break effect and weakness break efficiency matter more and more? So if your thought process is yes, it's going to be more and more, because maybe we have new characters, like maybe even abundance characters also that require break effect, that might be a chance, that be a higher probability, then Ruan Mei will play better in all of those teams as well. We have new sets now in 2.0, like some that buff break effect, so we might see a little bit more relevance in terms of break effect coming to the whole entire meta, so maybe they want to like branch into that aspect. In that sense, it's a low chance, but it's a possibility that maybe break effect could become more important. Ruan Mei would naturally increase in tandem as well. And that is for both of them. They have both good chances of performing well. And really, even at this point, I can touch my heart and tell you, both of them are going to be good. You really can't go wrong with either one. I do have a preference, which I'll share about in a bit. But now, let's talk about the last and most important thing, which is free-to-play kit. It makes no sense if we are saying that Ruan Mei needs like E1 S1 or Sparkle needs E1 S2 or something just to pop off. That makes no sense at all, because we need to compare the lowest amount of dollar value, because we want to save up for future characters, right? Maybe you like Acheron and stuff like that that's coming up. The real question then is, how do these two perform at E0 without any Eidolons? I think between both of them, my preference for a character in terms of analyzing their kit, probably Sparkle will come out on top compared to Ruan Mei at a very low investment like E0, S0. One of the reasons for that, as mentioned, is Sparkle has a very low burst cost. Ruan Mei has a very high burst cost requirement, and you do need to hit like certain thresholds of break effect. If you have like S5 Memories of the Past, which is a 4-star limited light cone, Ruan Mei is going to be a lot easier to build, but at the same time, it's still a lot of investment. It's very, very difficult to get. A lot of people just chose to go like the S1 route of her signature light cone memories of the past, I think, and just to breach that. So that is not cheap by any means to get this character at full working capacity. Sparkle, on the other hand, doesn't need any of that. We already saw in the chart over here, burst cost for Sparkle is like 110, Ruan Mei is like 130. That's a lot less. So she already has a lot less requirements for overall kit, will burst very, very often. In fact, the average, if you guys are wondering, average burst cost in the entire Honkai Star Rail game right now is like 121, which is much higher than what the 110 Sparkle is using as well. So that is a commentary of how they require in terms of free-to-play kits. In terms of stat distribution, I think that Sparkle is quite easy. She wants to buff crit damage, she wants a little bit of speed to move faster, maybe some sort of survivability. She doesn't really do damage in her overall kit. Her ult doesn't like do damage or whatsoever. So you can just slap on like simple gear like HP percentage to make her alive, some speed gear, some energy restoration if you wanted to, and yeah, more or less good to go. Whereas Ruan Mei needs like break effect at like 180%. She needs that 3-turn perfect rotation. You need to understand how to get a rotation. Sparkle's like plug and play. Super simple, super easy to use. You push characters, can pretty much work with a lot of characters in the game since she's a proxy to Bronya. But then, of course, the last thing that I want to talk about for a free-to-play player is if you are looking for a crit damage buffer, action advancer, you can get a free character like Bronya in 300 pools. The question then becomes is, are you going to play them both on the same team? Or if you're planning to get like Ruan Mei as well as Sparkle, where is Bronya going to go? Unless you're planning to play Bronya and Sparkle together, that do you really need that much of an overkill? I guess that's questions that I will be asking myself. And at this point, of course, as promised, I want to share with you my own personal bias. But before we do that, both of these characters really are really good. You can't really make a wrong decision here. I think both of them are really fantastic. It's, in my opinion, honestly, like picking a Rolex watch, which is like Sparkle here, versus a Patek Philippe watch. It's really very appropriate. Both of them, you could argue, are luxury watches. They'll both scale well with time. They're both very valuable, and anyone would want to have either of these two characters. But if you were to ask me personally, comparing these two characters, I think that my preference is going to be Ruan Mei a little bit more compared to Sparkle, and let me give you my honest reasons why. I don't want to convince any of you, this is just my own personal bias. A character like Ruan Mei scales with time. Any single team that is introduced in the game, Ruan Mei will be relevant, and if you are a player who has very little resources to spend, you want a character that can scale very long because you get your biggest bang of your buck by playing a character that can play into many teams, compared to a character that has some sort of alternatives, is very good in some, gives you like skill point buffing, but why can't you just ignore all those niche comps and go to generic comps that increase efficiency in your overall count? If you're a free-to-play player and you are really like penny pinching on your Primo Gems, Stellar Jades, whatnot, I think that's a factor worth considering, especially last but not least, of course, is a very flashy character might be coming up. Maybe Acheron is like super good, which gut feeling says it probably is. Sparkle is coming at a very awkward time in my opinion, and that is probably my biggest restraint in like recommending this character as like #1 must pull kind of thing. So I think that's my honest opinion, and if you guys appreciate such honest content, do check out our other videos on the channel. If you like these charts over here, you can take a look at some of the other videos that we have on the channel. I'll link it on this end screen. If you are decided I'm going to go with Sparkle, man, which I think is also a pretty good decision, check out the team comp guide for Sparkle. I go more in depth about a unique team comp that we explore with a character like Bronya and Esther on the same team. Anyways guys, thank you so much for watching. See you next video.